Oh, it is time. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another installment of the Isolated Literary Society presents Cowboy Feng Space Bar and Grille by Steven Brust. Hello, Savvy. Welcome. Punctual as always. For those following along at home, my sister notified me that she got busy this weekend and still was not able to catch up. She won't be here today. Hopefully tomorrow she'll be back. Anyway, housekeeping. The playlist is up to date. Links below of all the music from the book. As usual, I'll be adding any songs that are mentioned in the part that we read today after the reading. So I hope no one has said, I listened to it and it was cool to hear the songs from the book. So if you have done so, let me know, because I spent too many hours on putting all that together. What else is up? Pepper's here, but on the other side of the laptop, so he doesn't.
Pepper's fans have inquired whether he will be wearing a summer bandana soon.
Well, that bandana is starting to get a little tattered, so I was thinking about looking through my fabric stash. Pepper, come here.
I was like, it's the only bandana.
Yeah, but I have so much fabric that could be made into a bandana. Anyway.
It is a possibility.
Okay, he doesn't want to come up on the couch.
He's definitely ignoring you.
Yeah, he's completely ignoring me, so that's fine. He might come up later. Anything else that I need to say to stuff? I don't know. I am currently, when I am not reading to you guys, I'm currently reading this book. It's an epistolary murder mystery. I kind of hate epistolary novels, but I'm sort of forcing myself to read this one because I have a finite number of books in this house that I have not read. It's starting to get good, though. It's starting to get good. But yeah, great, the 60s pulpy cover on that. It is a collaboration with Dorothy Sayers, who I love, and some other guy. It's not...
This pulpy is pretty good.
Yeah. Also, Carolyn is reading this, which is one of Dorothy Sayers'
Although I think
Lord Peter Wimsey novels.
Is mostly naked, so I guess that's more pulpier.
That's true. This corpse is only wearing underpants, so that gets extra pulp points.
Yes.
I think this is funny because this is a completely inaccurate depiction of the murder that happens in this book.
Yes.
Like it's a man and he's sitting in a chair. End of similarities.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. I guess he's wearing a suit, and probably the guy that dies was wearing a suit.
I don't know. He's
in terms of
like an old military man, and it's the day before Armistice Day.
Oh, he might be wearing a uniform actually, or something. Yeah. Like that, right. So yeah, full stop. A man in a suit. They both appear to be dead. End of story.
Yeah.
Other than that, very
look as
unsimilar.
No. The gentleman described. As
also,
old mossy face.
he is so normal looking and not like contorted dramatically that nobody notices he's dead. That's part of the plot of the book.
Right.
Nobody notices he's dead for a number of hours, and then they can't pin down the time of death. This guy is like,
yeah,
very dramatic. Yeah. Anyway, not everything can have an exciting, brightly colored.
That is a very exciting cover.
Yeah, this is still more inaccurate than that one.
True, because it has everything in different places. And...
Well, just the fact that it has the bakery and the pet salon is pretty amazingly accurate. Everything else is inaccurate.
Yeah, that's true.
The aliens and aliens, the jet cars going around. In case anybody on the stream hasn't gotten a good look at this.
Yeah.
Like, nope, no aliens. It's kind of contradictory to the whole vibe of the book. Anyway, that's enough time for people to get their notifications and show up if they're going to show up. So let's get into the book. Let's see, where were we when we left off yesterday? They got a phone. That was very exciting.
Which is also a dishwasher.
Yeah. Talked a little bit about Jamie acquiring things. Staying in one place makes you accumulate. And then, then they sort of, somebody tries to burn down the place. Was that in the last reading?
No, I think that was
No, I think it was before. Anyway, meeting, can you get the...
I missed that one.
Lines. Forgot about the lines. Sure. Other things. Well, the biggest thing is that we ended the last chapter with the reveal of the band showing up at the bar before they've opened, and Rich, Eve, and Libby are standing in front of a table covered in what Billy describes as the largest collection of firearms I've ever seen in one place at one time. So that's where we left off. Hi, Michelle. Glad you made it. And now we are going to go to another intermezzo. So come, all you weavers, you Calton weavers. Come, all you weavers, where'er you be. Beware of whiskey, Nancy Whiskey. She'll ruin you like she ruined me. Nancy Whiskey, traditional. The mirror was dirty. Tom stared into it as if to see something deep and significant in the hollow-cheeked face that stared back at him. Maybe a picture of Dorian Gray effect, where he could identify rot that lay somewhere behind his eyes, or something to give him some clue as to why he was in this fucked up trash heap of a life. If he could only be sure he deserved it, it might be easier to take. Probably not, though. And in any case, the mirror was dirty, so that was about it for significance. He had a sudden urge to smash his fist into it, and for once, didn't. He wondered where Sarah was this morning and almost smashed his fist into the mirror yet once again. He thought about having a drink and made himself look into the mirror again just to think about something else. By now, he knew better than to have the first one. But then by now, Sarah should have known better than to be gone all night like that. Didn't she care about him? And the answer to that was yes, too fucking much. It was almost as if she were doing everything she could to make him drink, as if she were trying to, but she wasn't. Everything she did, she had a reason for doing that made sense while she was doing it, and that was pretty much as far as it needed to go. She was who she was, and he was who he was, and if they were going to spend a few months or years sticking knives into each other, then that's just how it would be. He didn't decide to go into the kitchen, but somehow there he was, standing in front of the refrigerator, wishing there were some beer. He dug around in the pockets of a few old jackets until he found enough money for a six-pack. He stared at it for a long time, then checked the clock above the sink. It was late. He'd have to settle for the sort of beer convenience stores sold. He shrugged. Before he left the apartment, he put a few things in his old duffel bag, not even half filling it. When he walked out, he noticed that his hand was trembling as he locked the door. That was funny in a detached sort of way. Then it was down 3 flights of stairs to the bus stop, and a timeless time until the bus came. Someone on the bus spoke to him, but it wasn't until several minutes later that he realized it, and then he wondered how he'd responded. When it let him off, he walked straight into the treatment center. He didn't look at the name above it. He didn't pause dramatically to have second thoughts or wonder if he could take it or if it was a good idea. He just walked through the door and checked himself in. Chapter 9. We put that car in motion and filled it to the brim with guns and bayonets shinin', which made old Johnson grin. Which made old Johnson grim. Very different. Johnson's motor car, traditional. Now that's interesting. I've never looked up that one, but it seems odd to me that a song written about a car would not have a known author. Usually songs have to be older than that to be considered traditional because we don't know who the original author was.
Yeah.
That seems odd, but I'll do a little research after the stream and I'll put whatever I find in the playlist. Hello, Aaron. All you missed was the intermezzo about Tom. We're going on to chapter 9 now. What really stands out in my memory from that moment was not, in fact, the collection of firearms that was getting grease on 3 of Fred's nice clean tables, but rather that instant split, as with an axe, between those who were waiting inside and those of us who were just arriving, between those who, as Jamie had suggested, worked for Feng, and those who were just along for the ride. Between those who might in some way be responsible for all of this, and those who were inarguably innocent. We were no longer simply a group of 8 friends. We were now Feng's people and the band, and we stared at each other as we looked at the piles of weapons occupying the tables. Well, it says motor car. So that was responding to Michael's comment that it could be a railway car. It says Johnson's Motor Car is the name of the song as given in the book. Now, it could be modernized lyrics to an older song. That's true. Like St. James Infirmary is a folk song, but right. Some of the people have added their own lyrics. So some of the versions you'll hear of it might have, 20th century references in them, but that doesn't make it not originally a folk song. Anyway. Jamie, Tom, Rose, and I looked at each other. Then Jamie said, "Yeah," and charged forward to get his hands on the gear. Rose slunk back. Tom and I walked slowly up to the table, and Tom picked up what looked like a service 45, ejected the magazine, and did things like he knew what he was doing. I just stared. He wanted a description. There were lots of guns, most of them brown or black or blue. Rose came up behind me and put her arms around me. She said very softly, "Billy." "Yes, sis?" "Do I have to have one of those?" "No, because you have your fiddle." "That's good. Those things scare me." "Me too." "Are you going to take one?" "No, I don't need one either, because I have a banjo." As we stood around the table, Fred cleared his throat and began speaking in a distinctly professorial tone. "We have," he said, "managed to procure a good variety of firearms. Each of you should be able to find a weapon or weapons suitable to your own needs. You may note that most or all of these were in use when we left the Earth. That is because there has not been, so far as I can tell, a great deal of advance in firearms technology, and because I picked out weapons with which I was familiar. Some of these were purchased here, although many were brought from home in anticipation of just such a requirement." He paused, during which I exchanged looks with Rose. Just such a requirement. I shuddered. "For myself," Fred continued, "I have selected an H&K MP5 machine pistol for area control, and a Winchester 30-06 with a 6x scope for distance work. For a handgun..." Sorry?
Armageddon Winchesters.
That was a weird time to reference that meme.
Sorry. I think of it every time I hear Winchester. I'm immediately like, Winchesters.
Oh, I've never heard that name applied to that meme.
Oh,
is it a reference to Supernatural?
It is.
Oh,
yeah. Okay. You just and you, if you combine it with a derp face of someone from the show, then it's Armageddon Winchesters.
That's a pretty good word to Ermagerd.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm just trying to get through this description of guns without completely saying things wrong because I don't know how to talk about guns. Anyway, for myself, Fred continued, I have selected an H&K MP5 machine pistol for area control and a Winchester 30-06 with a 6x scope for distance work. For a handgun, I have my own U.S. government issue Beretta 9mm semi-automatic pistol. Tom, you seem familiar with the Colt Government Model 45. Is that correct? Tom closed his mouth, opened it, and said, "I used one in the Navy." "Very good. I suggest you stick with it." "No, you stick with a knife. You shoot with a gun." Oh, Tom.
Yes.
Fred continued. For you, Jamie, with your size, I would recommend a large handgun. He picked one up. This is a Smith & Wesson 357 revolver with an 8-inch barrel. It is highly accurate, has good stopping power, and is extremely reliable. I'll check you out on the quick loader later. Jamie took it like he knew how to handle it, then said, "Do we have an Ithaca pump-action shotgun like Hawk has?" Hawk? In the Spencer books. Oh, Fred took him seriously. We have a Remington pump, but I would recommend the Ithaca side-by-side double-barreled 12-gauge since it could be sawed off, which a pump action cannot. 30-06, apparently Michael has corrected me. If that was the only mistake I made in that little section, in this whole section, I will be amazed, quite frankly. All right. Everything I know about guns comes from watching movies and TV shows. Like Aaron said, this machine annoys normies. This machine attracts middle-aged white guys. In reference to Michelle saying banjo is the ultimate weapon.
See, I was thinking of the mariachi in El Mariachi, I think it is. No, it's Once Upon a Time in Mexico.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
But they're a mariachi band, and all of their instruments also like shoot fire and shit like that.
Fun.
Yeah.
I
forget the name of the director, but it's classic. Yeah.
Wait, is it the same? Oh, now I've forgotten his name. I was going to say, is it the same director as El Mariachi? But now I've forgotten.
Yes.
What his name is.
Something with R, but it's
Antonio Banderas is the lead. I can see the poster in my head. Rodriguez?
Rodriguez is a good bet.
Anyway, that's not important.
Yeah.
Aaron has pointed out
escapes me,
that there's a Tom Waits song called 16 Shells from a 30-06. So if I was a bigger Tom Waits fan, maybe I would have known that one.
Well.
All right.
We all have goals.
Fred is just talking about the shotgun. For you, Eve, I don't want one, she said almost inaudibly. Very well. Rose? No, thank you. Rich? I know how to use a revolver. Wait, Rich? I'm not Rich. Oh, no, it's Fred was talking, sorry. You're also pretty big. Do you want the same thing Jamie has? We have a Colt model. I'd rather have something smaller, like that, say. Fred nodded and handed it to him. This is a Ruger 38 caliber revolver with a 4-inch barrel. There is also a quick loader that will work with it. Check, said Rich. Billy? No, thanks. Libby? That one. Are you sure? Yep. All right. He gave it to her. She held it up and said, this is a 44 caliber auto mag, the most powerful handgun in the... Clint Eastwood, said Tom. Dirty Harry. Even I knew that, said Jamie. Robert Rodriguez. Thank you, Michael. My brain said that, but I was too afraid of saying the wrong thing on camera. So I didn't say it out loud. I ventured Rodriguez, at least.
Yes.
There followed a few minutes of picking out boxes of ammunition, extra magazines, holsters, shoulder harnesses, and that sort of thing. I said, boy, we're really having fun now. Rich caught my eye. Is something wrong? Yeah, but it isn't your fault. Eve said, do they have to enjoy it so much? But she said it so softly, only I heard her. Libby said, we should all get together and talk, but we have to open the place up right now. How about after close tonight? No one disagreed. We helped get all the firearms out of the way and clean up the tables. As I was wiping one of them off, Fred approached me. I don't like the idea of you being unarmed, he said. Libby told me they tried to kill you. Yes, they did. I wish I knew why and what it meant and like that. He shrugged. I'm sure you do, but in the meantime, you should... Look, Fred, if I take one of those things and I get in trouble, I might be tempted to use it and I just hurt myself. I talked Rose into taking a Derringer. Seems to me you can... How did you do that? It was pearl-handled and had an engraved dragon's head. She likes monsters. In any case, why don't you... No, I wouldn't know what to do with it. He licked his lips. Just a minute. He disappeared into the back for a moment. I continued cleaning the table. When I came back, there was something in his hand. How about this, then? I stared at it. It's a British commando knife. Don't try to throw it or you'll snap the blade. You could cut with it, but it's best used straight into your target. Target, I repeated softly. He nodded, his eyes locked with mine. Our eyes were very communicative that day. I took the knife. After the tables had been cleaned up and Feng's opened, I pulled Rich and Eve aside and gave them the details of what had happened yesterday. I heard most of it from Libby, Rich said, taking off his jacket in order to put on the shoulder rig for his pistol. I helped him with this. Eve did not. I said, "It scares me how natural you look in that thing. Do you know how to shoot?" "You point with it and squeeze the trigger." He held up his hand. "I know. Yes, I've had gun safety courses and I've done target shooting." I nodded. "I'm just freaked, I guess. For one thing, the notion of putting a loaded weapon into Jamie's hands frightens me." "Me too. But he told me his father used to take him hunting, so he knows how to use them at least." "Yeah, and he isn't really as irresponsible as he pretends to be. At least, not all the time." Eve shuddered and squashed herself against Rich. Her hand came in contact with the holster and she jerked back like she was burned. She stared at him for a moment, then turned and fled toward the pantry. I looked at Rich and he stared back as if daring me to make a comment. I said, "Do you know if she found out anything about Monsieur Rudd?" I saw him mentally shift gears. Yes, the Rudd family is mentioned in the Russian book. They've been in New Quebec for 40 years, as far as we can tell. She's still trying to track down what they, and Harold especially, have been up to. These people don't leave many tracks. I think spoor is the appropriate term, or maybe fumets. Right. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing the word fumets right, but I also don't know what it is.
I have never heard that.
Somebody look it up. Oh, keep at it. I don't know why he tried to kill me. Hell, maybe we can convince him not to. Oh, I want to know why he tried to kill me. Hell, maybe we can convince him not to. Right, said Rich ironically, and headed out into the street. I sat down at a table that had recently held about 100 pounds of weaponry and drank more coffee than was good for me. I thought about having a cigarette. I spent a great deal of time thinking about having a cigarette, although not as much time as I had 6 months before. Stupid way to spend your time, not smoking. Hi there, what you been up to? Oh, I've been not smoking. You? Not drinking. What you gonna do tomorrow? Oh, I thought I'd not drink coffee without cream and sugar. You know, maybe in the evening I'll not gamble for a while. Crap. I was wearing my jacket indoors now. I was wearing a shoulder rig from which a very sharp black dagger hung upside down so I could get at it quickly. I felt the weight of the thing and hated it a lot. According to Michael, fumets are poop in medieval. Okay.
I wouldn't even know how it was spelled.
Fewmets, pretty much.
Okay.
I sighed and mused and drank coffee, and presently Tom showed up next to the table. "How are things, Billy?" "Okay," I said. There was a slight bulge in his jacket about belt level, where he had the .45 stashed, and his pockets were heavy with extra magazines. He sat down across from me. "What's up with you?" "What's up with you?" Sorry, that's Billy. "I'm going to have a talk with Carrie." "Well, that's good, I guess." "Yeah, and she has a message for you." "Oh?" She said to tell you Susie's back in town." "Great," I said. "That's all I need." Just about then, we were joined by Christian, who put his feet up on the booth and lit a cigarette. "So, how are you gentlemen today?" "Getting by," I said. Tom nodded. Christian said, "Has there been something happening lately?" "Why do you ask?" "Well, from the looks on your faces, I'd say you were upset about something." "We're both pinheads," explained Tom. "I see." There was silence. Then Christian cleared his throat. "So, what's a pinhead?" "Ask Libby," I suggested. "Who?" "The bartender." "Oh, bartender. Beer. Now there's an idea. See you gents later." He strode into the tap room and sat at the bar. Tom and I continued our commiserating, the details of which I will spare you. But an hour or so later, as I got up to leave, I noticed that Christian was still sitting at the bar, presumably learning what a pinhead was, according to the wisdom of Libby Sangretti. I made a mental note to ask one or the other of them what she'd said, but with one thing and another, I never got around to it. I found Jamie looking out the window of our apartment. Leaning against the wall next to him was an Ithaca 12-gauge side-by-side double-barreled shotgun. I said, "Is it loaded?" "Huh?" He snapped his head around. Oh, you startled me. And you didn't go for your gun? Should I have? Maybe. I don't know. Yeah, it's loaded, but the safety's on. He indicated the big black 357 lying on the counter as if it were just another kitchen utensil. That's loaded too, but there's no round under the hammer. That's a great comfort to me. What were you thinking about? Guns. What about them? He shrugged. I was shot once, you know. No, I hadn't known that. What happened? Nothing. Never mind. You seem to enjoy picking out your toys. I did. You would have too. Maybe. But I was standing there thinking that I might actually have to use one of these. I mean, point it at someone and pull the trigger. Think you can? Yes. I couldn't. You sure? Not completely, I guess. He stood there a moment longer, then turned to me. Libby once told me she was afraid of guns because it would be too easy for her to shoot someone. Now I know what she means. I understand. She nodded and turned back to the window. He nodded and turned back to the window. I came over and stood next to him. Like, for instance, he said, wouldn't you kind of like to just open up the window and blow that little motherfucker away? I followed his gaze. Short, curly-haired Claude was leaning against a tree, watching our apartment from just across the street, arms folded, as calm as you please. I didn't answer Jamie, in part because I found myself agreeing with him. Susie? Yes. This is Billy. I can see that. Oh, right. You don't have your camera on. Mm-hmm. Welcome back. Thanks. 1, 2, 3, 4. So, should we get together or something? What do you want to do? I don't know. Have lunch? Some drinks? I'm on a diet. Take a walk? Where? I don't know. Oh my goodness. Bless you. Take a walk? Where? I don't know. Want to talk? What about? Um, Never mind. Look, I'll call you again, all right? Sure. Bye. Bye. Fred told me there are many imitations of the British commando knife of World War II because, in spite of the brittleness of the blade, it is one of the best anti-personnel knives ever invented. He also said it was easy to identify the real thing by the imprint on the guard. I couldn't read the tiny writing of the imprint, so I don't know what the real one said or why a fake one couldn't say something equally illegible which would fool me. He called it a very sexy weapon, which may give you some idea of what he's like. The phrase made me shudder, in part because I could almost see what he meant. The knife, all 12 inches or so of it, was painted with non-reflective black paint. The hilt was cigar-shaped and fit my hand better than I'd have thought just looking at it, and better than I sort of wished it did. There was a little knob at the end, which I guess was a screw or a nut that held it together. The guard was small because, according to Fred, this was not primarily a knife fighter's weapon, but one intended for sticking in the backs of one's enemy. Certainly the blade had that look. It was very slim and had a flattened out diamond shape. It really did have a good edge, and as I ran the point along my inside forearm directly above the artery and watched the impression the blade made, I realized how incredibly easy it would be to just exert a little more pressure there. It would hardly take any effort. Hardly any effort at all. Eventually, I put the knife in its sheath, took the harness off, and set it on the floor, and went over to my futon and lay on my back, staring at the big beige soundproofing tiles on my ceiling. How's it going, Tom? All right. Carrie and I talked and got some things straightened out. Well, that's good. How about you? I'm doing all right. Talked to Susie today. Oh, really? How is she? Fine. She says she's on a diet. Libby wiped out the last ashtray and turned a key on what was now an antique cash register. Her hair looked jet black in this light, her face pale, her eyes very bright. Okay, I'm done, she announced. Very good, said Fred, pushing a pair of tables together. The last customers had left 15 minutes before, and we'd all helped out getting the place ready. No one said anything about what we were gathered for because they were afraid to, or because they were enjoying the suspense, because they were busy, or in my case, because I wasn't terribly interested. Rich ran a bug detector around the room. Jamie said, "What about microphones from outside the building?" Any microphones pointed at this building will only hear the D below middle C, said Rich. Ah, said Jamie, and sat down at one end of the double table. I don't know if everybody remembers because we've been reading this so chopped up, but that is the sound that the air conditioner or the air vent makes. There.
Yep.
Ah, said Jamie, and sat down on one end of the double table. Rose on his right, me on his left. Tom sat next to me with Fred across from him, next to Rose. Eve sat next to Tom, Libby next to Fred, and Rich took the other end, his back to the bar, facing the stage and Jamie. We all drank coffee, some of us with cream and sugar. Rich and Jamie stared across the table at each other, and I had a sudden premonition that they'd end up shooting each other before the meeting was over. I almost suggested that everyone put his gun behind the bar, but I couldn't think of a way to say it that would have been taken seriously. There are things some of you probably want to know, said Rich. Maybe you should begin by asking them. I'm up for that, said Jamie. I'll start. What the hell is going on? Rich looked at his fellow conspirators, if you will, then back at Jamie. Would you care, he said, to break that down a little? All right. First of all, why is it this place keeps getting nuked? And second, why is it every time it does, we end up jumping to another city or planet or solar system or galaxy or dimension? And don't forget time, put in Rose. Yeah, said Jamie, like she said. What about it? Some of that, said Fred, we don't know ourselves. I was hired originally as a waiter and bouncer, and I didn't know any of the rest of it until Rich told me. I've never met Feng. Who has? Asked Tom. Rich held up his hand, as did Libby. Where is he now? Asked Tom. Rich looked uncomfortable. You know we're dealing with time travel here, right? Yeah, said Jamie, as if he'd been traveling through time all his life. Well then, now is a funny concept. I think I can say that he's not anywhere. Look, snapped Libby, if you could go shooting through time and space anywhere you pleased, would you hang around in a restaurant that might get hit by a nuclear bomb any second? I would, said Jamie. You probably would, said Rich. I thought this place was safe, said Rose. The four of us looked at each other. Well, said Rich slowly, it is radiation proof. And it does have means of jumping away from trouble very quickly as long as it has sufficient power. And it does have the means of taking that power from a nuclear explosion. So, said Libby, as long as the bomb doesn't hit so far away that we don't get enough of the energy, or so close that we're toasted before we can jump, as long as everything works, we're okay, concluded Libby. Oh, that's just great, said Jamie. There's a pretty big window for how close it has to be and how close it can come, said Rich. It's worked so far, added Fred. Rose said, Can I have a... No, said Jamie. What else do you want to know? Asked Rich. What it's all about. Saving the future, said Libby. Is that noble enough for you? Jamie stood up, rose to his feet, turned so he had a profile of his face, stuck his chest out, and deepened his voice. Yes, he declaimed. Captain James Lindhall of the Time Travel Rangers shall go forth once more to... Will you sit down? Said Rich. I was enjoying it, said Tom. Me too, said Libby. I want whiskey, said Rose. Jamie sat down. Fred suddenly turned to me. You haven't said anything. I'm just listening. I'll ask any questions I think of. Very well. Do you think, asked Jamie of Libby in particular, and the table in general, you might be persuaded to be just a trifle more specific about what you mean by saving the future? It isn't that easy, said Rich. What's not that easy, said Libby. He wants to know what the whole thing's about. Tell him. She turned to Jamie. A few hundred years from now, a large group of nutcases are trying to wipe out all of Feng's people. We have to fix things. What do you mean, Feng's people? How many? As I understand it, the population of several worlds. Wow. So you mean find these guys and kill? No, this is time travel stuff. Nothing works that easy. We can't do anything that would change history, or rather, the future history that allowed us to be here. Huh? Oh, I see what you mean. But then how? Feng, said Libby, says that up to a point, history will correct itself. And beyond that point, it is impossible to do anything that will change it. Okay, then. The exceptions are things he calls nexus points, which are intersections of... She stopped, looked puzzled, stared at me, then at Fred, finally turned to Rich and said, "You explain it." I know, Aaron. Here we go. Time travel rules. In the infamous words of Jeff... what's the actor's name? Can't remember the character's name or the actor's name now. The guy in Looper who says, "This time travel shit just fry your brain like an egg."
Oh, yeah.
One of my favorite lines in that movie. Rich said, they can trace effects, so they can find places where if you do this thing, it won't change history until after the time you left from the future. Does that make sense? It almost does, said Tom. That's scary. Rose nodded. Tom turned to me. Do you believe all of this? Yes, I said. I'm not sure why, though. He nodded. That's how I feel. Jamie said, so what do we do? Each time we've jumped, said Rich, it's been to a nexus point. Unfortunately, at most of them, we didn't stay long enough to accomplish our mission. On the plus side, with all the jumping, we've been lucky enough not to lose anyone on the team. Jamie said, how does it know where to go when a bomb hits? Got me, said Libby. Rich, Eve, Fred? They all shook their heads. Jamie said, but what's the job? We don't know exactly. Doing whatever we have to save Feng's people. You're sure they're the good guys? Rich said, would you grow up? It was a joke, said Jamie. Do you want in? Said Libby. If you didn't think we did, why did you give us the guns? Because they tried to kill Billy, which means you guys are in danger whether you want to be or not, so we owe you the chance to defend yourselves. Who tried to kill Billy? Said Rose, staring at me. Jamie and Tom were also doing the wide-eyed thing. That guy who was killed in here, I said. I found out that someone thought he was me. They also tried again last night. Why didn't you tell us? Said Rose. Because I was stupid. So what else is new? Said Jamie. Shit. That's another thing, Jamie continued. Why did they try to kill Billy? He looked from Rich to Libby to me, but it was Fred who answered. I have a theory. I said, I'd like to hear it. I'm not certain of this, but it seems to me that if Feng's people can go into the past, so can the other guys. And it may be that Billy is the one who will stop them. They have to kill Billy in particular. I studied the tabletop. It had a nice mosaic pattern of black against green. Well, I said after a time, that really sucks. Just a brief hydration break. Hydration / moisturization. Yes. Very important.
All the hydrations.
All right. Another intermezzo. I'll tell me ma when I go home. The boys won't leave the girls alone. I'll tell me ma. Traditional. The motherfucker has a gun. It just kept going over and over in his head like that, like a chant. He couldn't explain it the way he'd been able to years later. In terms of unwritten rules, customs, and so on, he just felt the outrage. He was in an alley next to a park with 6 of his friends. They started in the park, and then 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 of them had taken off down the alley. They were fighting because they were fighting, and he would win this fight because he always won, but the motherfucker has a gun. It almost overshadowed the other statement that pierced his thoughts like a dagger. He's pointing it at me. One of the things he most enjoyed was those delicious moments when he could step back and just watch himself in action, when thinking and planning were beside the point, and the motions of his fists, the sounds of flesh striking flesh, the blur of action around him all became, as he wouldn't be able to express it to himself until years later, surreal. It went beyond being impressive to someone else or to himself. It was strange and mystical, like nothing else, and the people he was pounding into the ground were beside the point. There was a tug high on his right leg, and somewhere way, way back, there was pain. The motherfucker has a gun. The motherfucker just shot me. The motherfucker just fucking tried to fucking kill me. And I'm going to kill him. There was a baseball bat in his hand, so he threw it, and he wasn't surprised until later that, after turning 4.5 lazy circles, it actually connected, bam, right in the head. He hoped he hadn't killed him yet so he could do it again, and so it was, because the motherfucker was starting to stand up already. But there he was, but then he was there, and then he had the gun, and he was pointing at the motherfucker's head, and he was slowly, so slowly, squeezing the trigger, and eyes were wide with fear, and he knew he was about to die, and... Don't, Jamie, don't kill him. Tip's voice. Shit, what did he want? Well, fuck it then. And Jamie threw the gun down the alley and started pounding. He'd beat him to death then. That'd be more fun anyway. He was gone. So far gone, he was no longer even watching himself. It was just happening, and he was never fully aware of what went on between then and when Tip's voice finally penetrated for the second time. Jamie, stop it! Jamie, Jesus, you're killing him! Jamie! And somehow, he did stop. Okay, Tip. He felt like he wasn't even breathing heavy. He wondered when his leg would start hurting and realized the pants were ruined. We gotta split, Jamie, now. Right, said Jamie, sounding and feeling just a bit stupid. He looked at the guy he'd been pounding on. Shit, a kid, maybe 16, Jamie's age, and smaller. Why the fuck had he brought the... Jamie stared. Tip, is he breathing? Huh? Shit, yes, man. Let's go. Tip had his arm and was trying to drag him. Jamie stared, ignoring the mass of blood over the kid's face, trying to see some sign of life. He didn't, but he was no state to really tell either. Jamie! Yeah, all right. He allowed himself to be dragged away. He noticed in passing that they were the last two combatants in the area. Then he connected the sirens to the fight they'd had and took off in earnest. I'm afraid I killed him, said Jamie, but so softly Tip didn't hear him. He didn't repeat it aloud or really to himself either, except that for years, in his mind, he'd see the kid lying there. Sometimes he'd see the kid breathing. Other times he would see that the kid was not. The fight never made it into the papers, and Jamie never ran into any of them again, so he never found out. By the time 2 months had passed, Jamie had pretty much stopped hanging out with Tip and his friends. Looking around for something to do instead, he picked up his father's old Gibson and started wailing away at it. But sometimes, for years, the kid still made his way into Jamie's dreams. And on those nights, Jamie didn't sleep well. Yes, as Aaron so eloquently put it, fucking Jamie. All these people have complicated pasts, but Jamie's kind of a piece of shit.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. Yeah, this chapter is pretty short. Chapter 10. I know this. That's why. I was like, I know this one, but I can't remember the melody. If my true love she should go, I will surely find another. Will you go, lassie, go? Robert Burns. I remember the melody of the title line. Will you go, lassie, go? I don't remember the rest of it. Anyway. Yes. As Aaron put it, at least music saved him in a way. As it seems to have done for a lot of the musicians in the story. I could be wrong, said Fred. I nodded. Jamie said, we'll have to be careful to protect you. I said, let's not get carried away with this. We should all be careful and not wander around alone or late at night. They were going for me the first time. They might go for someone else next time. Or for Feng's itself, I added, which they've done twice already. This is true, said Fred. Which brings us, said Libby, to the question I asked before. Do you want in? I said, it would be pretty silly of me not to, wouldn't it? Libby smiled. How about it, Jamie? He laughed. What, saving the galaxy? Yeah, I'm up for it. Tom just nodded. Rose said, well, if the rest of my band is going to, I guess I will too. I'll be the fiddle player. We figured you for the whiskey taster, said Libby. I can do that too. You know, said Tom, that does bring up a question. Just what do you want us for? I mean, are you going to get us jobs or something? The four of them exchanged looks. We don't really know, said Rich. Just knowing that we can count on you is the main thing. Other than that, we'll have to see what happens. One thing, said Jamie. Yeah? About those guns. Do you know what it's legal to carry in this colony? That's a tricky question, said Rich. For one thing, there are no laws about carrying firearms at all. But you have to understand, most people don't carry guns. So if Fred wanders around with his Uzi, H&K, said Fred, whatever, he's going to get looked at. But the other end of it is, well, he turned to Eve. Oh, why don't you tell them? She cleared her throat. Billy, do you remember the sergeant who questioned you after the shooting? Not really. I was pretty much in a daze. Well, his name is Iverness, and that doesn't sound very French, accused Tom. Not everyone who lives here is French, said Rich. He was joking, said Jamie. Eve continued patiently. There are several Ivernesses in the local police department. Okay, and? Iverness is the maiden name of Harold Rudd's mother. Oh, great, said Jamie, beating me to it. Does that mean the whole police department is on their side? Pretty much, said Rich. Then we've had it, said Jamie. They can just walk in here. Let them try, said Fred. But they can't, said Rich. It isn't that easy. They control the police department and most of the city, but it isn't anything like absolute. It means they didn't really investigate the shooting of whoever was shot here. And it means if we're found dead one day, it won't be investigated too heavily either. But no, they can't go blatantly ignoring their own laws. I hope. Well, so it's got one up on the current situation. Jamie said, so if they shoot one of us, they can get away with it. But if we shoot one of them, they'll probably come up after us with the whole department. Yeah. Oh, that's great. And no one said life was fair, said Rich. After that, there wasn't much to say. We sat for a while, staring into empty coffee cups while trying to think of encouraging things to tell each other and failing. I think we should get some sleep now, said Fred at last. Good idea, said Rich. Fred continued. Those of you who are living at the apartment should walk home together and try to find routes which do not take you past that agency. Ideally, find several and mix them up. Also, you may want to consider moving back here. A thought, said Jamie, and looked at me. I shrugged. The original reason why I wanted a place in my own head very likely vanished. Honestly, the fact that he said very likely is very hopeful for him, honestly.
Yeah.
I'll think about it, I said. Let's go home, said Jamie. The four of us walked together, looking over our shoulders all the while. I couldn't escape the feeling that I was in enemy territory, and I was starting to be glad that I had the knife with me after all. Thursday, we all stayed in, and miracle of miracles, got some practicing done.
Wonder of wonders.
God took a tailor by the hand. Not a great deal, and we didn't play very well, but I felt better for having done it. Ditto for Wednesday. I also read a few summaries of recent history that Eve had found in the library's English language section. One was mostly political and too dry for me to force my way through, and the other's too technical for me to get much out of. Later, Rose went into the bedroom to work on some fiddle tunes. Jamie and Tom and I drank coffee. So, how are things with Carrie? Better, said Tom. I don't know. Sometimes it's great, and sometimes we just tear each other apart. I know she's been sleeping with other guys, I can tell, but she denies it, and I don't understand that, I said. Jealousy, I mean. So she's sleeping with other guys. Why does it matter? It wouldn't bother you? It never has. I don't know. Maybe I've just never been in the kind of situation where it would. Jamie said I used to get jealous, but it was sort of beat out of me by, well, it doesn't matter now. She's history. Literally, said Tom. Jamie shuddered, and we fell silent and began to get depressed. All I know, said Tom, is that it drives me crazy that she's sleeping with other guys. It isn't that I think you're wrong. It's just that I don't understand. It's different with me. It just hurts that she's not with me. You're a pinhead, said Tom. That's what Libby tells me. It'll take a while to get over it, said Jamie. I know, I said. How many times have you been burned? Like that? 3 times. It's easier after the first. Well, that makes me feel much better, I suppose, though that it's pretty surprising it hasn't happened before, all things considered. Your basic broken heart. Shit. So stupid. It is, said Jamie. There's so much else in life. I mean, take a walk and look around. I'll get over it, I said. Women, said Tom. Here, here, said Jamie. Well, what about Rose? I asked.
I was just going to say roses, am I right? And that was as a reference to the Little Prince.
Oh, yeah.
And then they mentioned Rose.
Rose.
I'm like, ah! It all ties together.
I don't think that's why Rose is named Rose, although
no, I don't think so either.
She's not the love interest, so she's in a relationship with Jamie, but yeah.
It was just a moment.
No, that's funny.
In reading. Yeah.
What about Rose? I asked. Well, what about her? She's in love with you. Yeah, he said miserably. I know. After a long moment of silence, Jamie said, You see why I'd rather just worry about people shooting at me? Hell, at least I can shoot back. You know, I almost do understand, said Tom. Me too, I said. That scares me. Jamie went out that evening. He took his pistol with him, but left the shotgun. I had no idea how worried about him I was until he came back the next afternoon. Rose, of course, was frantic and dealt with it by picking on him for the whole rest of the day, mostly about how ugly his beard was. He, of course, responded by calling her various vile and disgusting things, all of which escalated until Tom and I had to leave. Be careful, said Jamie. Drop dead, I suggested cheerfully. That's a great idea, Jim, said Rose as the door closed behind us. Why don't you do what he... And their voices mercifully faded into the distance. Once out on the naked street, I wanted to bolt back inside. I forced myself to relax and said, Well, where to? Fangs? How about Carrie's? Sounds good, I said, and we set off in a direction I hadn't gone before. It was more than 2 miles, but the weather was good for walking. The danger began to take on a feeling of distance and unreality, which made it actually sort of fun. I could almost understand some of how Jamie enjoyed picking out weapons. Tom was, I think, more alert than I, and kept looking around, but nothing untoward happened. Carrie had rented a tiny little house set in the middle of a big lot. The lot had a lawn that looked ignored and several apple trees that looked even more ignored. A few limbs had broken from the weight of unpicked apples. The house itself, however, seemed to be well tended. The wood stain was new, at any rate, and there were no signs of disrepair that I noticed as we approached. It was incongruous, as if someone had bought a big lot, but could only afford a small house. Tom knocked directly on the door. There was no screen. It was opened almost at once. Carrie stood there in a bathrobe, a look of shock on her face. We could see past her into the house where Justin sat, wearing only a towel. They both had wet hair. Justin was holding a razor blade over a mirror on which was a white powder that must have been Coke. There was a baggie next to the mirror with a small quantity of powder in it. I wanted to say, This is a raid, just to see what sort of reaction it would elicit, but I didn't have the chance, even if I'd chosen it. Tom moved quickly, stepped into the house, shoving Carrie aside with the same motion. I came in behind him, and he already had the .45 out and was shoving the magazine home with a practiced hand. Tom, don't, I said as he took aim at Justin's head. Justin just stared at him. Carrie began screaming. Tom hesitated, and his hand trembled. Why the fuck not? He asked. I tried to think of a reason and couldn't. Don't do it, Tom, I said. Please. Carrie kept screaming. And Justin, well, he had balls, I'll give him that. He just stared down at Tom with a superior smirk on his lip, his beady eyes squinting, as if a bullet or two in the head didn't faze him in the least. I wanted to blow him away. And Carrie kept screaming, and Tom's hand still trembled as he held the gun pointed right into Justin's face. Tom, don't, I said once more. Shit, he said. I could hardly hear him over Carrie's screaming. He turned and looked at her, then took a step forward and kicked, upsetting table, mirror, and Coke. Then he turned and walked out of the house. I backed out after him. Justin still hadn't moved. Tom was considerably ahead of me when I closed the door of the house. Carrie's screams abruptly ceased, and I thought I could hear her starting to cry. I caught up with Tom, looking back over my shoulder in case Justin was armed, and decided to try to get us. He wasn't, or didn't. Tom was taking long strides and still holding the gun. I hoped we didn't meet up with anyone before he thought to put it away, and in fact, we didn't. When we reached the apartment, Tom sat down in the corner and closed his eyes. Jamie said, "What happened?" "Never mind," I said, "just never mind." Later that day, Jamie and Rose started in on each other, and Tom and I stood up at the same time, and the two of them promptly shut up. "Hi." "Oh, it's you. Don't you ever turn your camera on?" "Not often." "Oh, well, want to get together sometime?" "And do what?" "I think we've had this conversation before." "Look, you called me." "That's true. I must have had a reason." "I understand your friend Tom made an ass of himself with Carrie." "Is that how you heard it?" "Well, didn't he go barging in there and almost beat Carrie to death and then break down and start bawling?" It's not exactly as I remember it." "Well, then what did happen?" "Doesn't matter. Tom shouldn't have gone over without calling first in any case." "Why tell me? He's your friend." "Yeah. Look, I have to go. I'll see you later." "When?" "I don't know. Sometime. Bye." "Bye." The next day was Friday, but Fred called and explained he'd found a solo Irish act to play for us that weekend. At first, I was outraged. "Why did you do that?" "Billy, can you think of what you guys will be like standing on that stage for 3 hours?" "What do you mean? Oh, right. Targets. Can you say sitting ducks?" "I get it. Shit. I'll tell the others." I did, and they didn't like it, but they understood. Unfortunately, it not only left us with nothing to do, but it took all the wind out of our sails for practicing. Tom and I took a walk so we could talk about what had happened, but then we found out we didn't have anything to say, except Tom kept repeating, "I should have killed him. Should have killed him," like a litany. Jamie took off again that night. The next morning, when he wasn't back, Rose said, "I wonder where Jim is." "Who knows?" "Well, I mean, I wouldn't want him to be killed. By anyone except me, that is." "But where?" Oh, I looked at Tom, who rolled his eyes. "I understand," I said. "I'm sure he's all right." "But where? I wish he'd let us know." I shrugged. Was I supposed to tell her he was safe with some woman, or that he was no doubt out alone all night? "I'm sure he's fine," I said. "How are you?" "Grand," she said. "Couldn't be better. This place is so much nicer when that man is away. I mean, aside from him." "Fine. I've been working on a new song that man wanted me to learn." "Great," I said. She sat down next to me, and I put my arm around her, and I think it may have helped her. In any case, thinking I was helping her helped me. Later, being my usual stupid self, I called Susie, hoping she might have changed her mind. About what, I'm not sure. As usual, she had her camera off. When she answered, I said, "Hi, how's it going?" She said, "All right, I'm sort of busy." At the same time, in the distance, I heard I heard a voice saying, "Who is it?" A man's voice. Jamie's, to be exact. I disconnected. Fucking Jamie.
Seriously. Jeez.
And that is where we're going to end for today, with Jamie being a shit.
I mean, he pretty much always is, but...
Oh, yeah, but being extra shitty.
Yeah.
Extra bonus shitty. Yes, Aaron, as you said, 3 exclamation points. All right. Well, thank you, Aaron, for sticking around until we finished, and thank you everyone else for tuning in. Savvy and Michelle and Michael, and there's at least one other person in here who's not in the chat, or that I've forgotten. Sorry if that's the case. Anyway, yeah, that's it for today. I will add the songs to the playlist. Looking forward to finding out what the deal is about Johnson's motor car. Also looking forward to finding a good video of that Robert Burns poem. That'll be fun. I don't have like a favorite recording of it, so it'll be cool to look into some of those. Luckily, there weren't a ton of songs mentioned here, so I won't have a ton of songs to add, which is just as well, as the list is quite long already. Anyway, thank you everyone for tuning in. We will be here tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Pacific once again. I have a concert this weekend. It'll be on Saturday at 5 p.m. Pacific. I haven't made the video page for it yet, but I will in the next 48 hours at the most. I was supposed to do it over the weekend, but I didn't. If you're somehow new to this and you haven't seen the ends of the other videos, I'm also a musician and a writer. Links below to check out my stuff. You can listen to my music, or I released a short story audio collection, 3 short stories written by me, read by me and my friends. Check that out down below. It's free to stream. If you can afford to pay to download it, that's great. But if you can't, you are totally free to just listen. So I think that is all the things I have to say. Thanks everyone for hanging out, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.